All right, so here's the setting we want. The RSI should be edited from a standard 14-period RSI to a 5-period setting. In other words, whatever charting software you're using, you should have an edit box for your RSI tool, your RSI indicator. Once you have that, go into that edit box, and the standard default setting for the RSI is 14. It should be now changed to read 5. That just means that instead of going back 14 bars to come up with our calculations, we just want to look back 5 bars to come up with our calculations, okay? So whatever you're looking at, a daily bar, a weekly bar, or a 5-minute bar, it's just going to take a look back 5 time periods. All right, so let's look at an older chart here of the British pound. As you can see here, this is an older chart, but we have a lot of movement going on from higher to lower to back up to back down and then higher again. Now here's the standard 14-period RSI. As you can see, it's not very dynamic. It's within the threshold, so it's not really giving you any clues as to what to do. As long as it's in these parameters, we're really not sure how to use it. Even in an overbought, oversold tool, how do we apply this here? It's not very dynamic, once again. It's very static, and it's just kind of going sideways on a horizontal pace. So let's change this to our new setting from a 14-period RSI to a 5-period. And you now see how it's much more dynamic, how we have a lot more action to work with. Not saying that we know exactly what we're doing at this point, but it's just basically telling us that what we're trying to do is we're trying to look for a little bit more movement, a little bit more volatility, so that we can, come up with some type of application rather than using the standard 14 period. So once again, this is an old chart of the British pound, but we want to change the RSI to read 5 periods. Okay, this should be from now on your standard setting for the RSI. Totally forget about the 14 period and go to a 5-period RSI. Now, we want to edit the standard overbought, oversold thresholds to 50. All right, that's what we're doing now. So we have these standard overbought, oversold thresholds of, I believe, 70 and 30. And so people say, okay, well, we get above 70, we sell. We get below 30, we buy. No, we're not going to use this again. We're not looking for overbought or oversold. The way my mentors taught me is they said, Steve, there is no such thing as overbought, oversold. Overbought, oversold, once again, works until it doesn't work, and then you give everything back. So what we want to do is get rid of those 30 and 70 thresholds and just make one threshold at 50. That's the median right in the middle. So if we look at a chart again of the British pound, here's where the standard overbought and oversold thresholds are. All right? And here is the 5-period RSI. What we want to do is get rid of these and just make one in the middle, which is 50. Okay? Now, some charting software packages won't allow you to get rid of 70 and 30. If you can't do that, then just plot a line in the middle at the 50 threshold. Okay? So you have 3 lines instead of just 1. But all we want to make sure is that we are seeing where the 50 line is. Okay, we got that? So that was our first edge. So now we have the proper setting. Okay, that's a tremendous edge we've just been giving you for free. That's usually reserved for members of specialist trading, but we've shared that with you on the proper usage of the RSI. Change it to a 5-period setting and only use the 50 threshold. Get rid of the 70 and 30. Now let's go on to edge number 2. We want to use the RSI as a directional tool. Remember, we're not concerned with overbought and oversold. I can virtually tell you stories and stories of how well trading overbought and oversold worked for me, and I can then tell you how one trade wiped it all out. So we don't want that in our trading. We don't want this type of roller coaster in our P&L. What we want is consistency. We want 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And so we're not trading overbought, oversold. We're looking for a directional tool to tell us the direction of the trend. All right, so here's how you're going to use this. If an uptrend is in place, this is what we're looking for. You may want to write this down. Once again, I believe that FXStreet is recording this presentation, so you can go back later on when they post the recording. But if you want to write this down, if we're in an uptrend, here are the requirements that must be met. First of all, the price of the currency pair, regardless of the time frame, if it's a 5-minute chart or if it's a weekly chart, it doesn't matter. Price must close above the 50-period simple moving average. Okay, so we want to plot a 50-period simple moving average, and we have to see that price is now above. In other words, the closing price is above the 50-period simple moving average. All right, next, we want to see the 5-period RSI cross above the 50 threshold. So in other words, we want to see that it was below 50 and it now crosses up above so that the indicator, the RSI tool, is now closing above 50, okay? That 50 threshold in the middle there. Now, if we have these two things in place, we will most likely find that a strong upward direction is likely as long as the 5-period RSI closes above that 50 line, that 50 threshold, for a minimum of 5 bars. So we want to see it close above that 50 midline for a minimum of 5 bars. Once again, this can be 5 5-minute bars, it can be 5 1-minute bars, or it can be 5 monthly bars. It does not matter. All right, so let's go through this step by step so that you fully understand this process. All right, step 1. We want to see the currency pair close above the 50-period simple moving average, regardless of what time frame we are looking at. So here's an older chart of the Australian dollar, once again, and for all intents and purposes, the majority price is closing above the 50-period simple moving average. We had one bar here where we closed below, but all we're interested in is that at the time that the RSI crosses above, we are above the 50-period simple moving average. So we're above the 50. That's rule number 1. Step number 2, the 5-period RSI must now cross above the 50 threshold. Okay? So once price is above the 50-period simple moving average, then we go to the indicator, and we want to see the 5-period RSI cross and close above the 50 threshold. All right, so here we see price is above, and at the same time we had the RSI below, and it crossed back above. So now it's closed above, and it corresponds with this bar right here. All right? So those are 2 requirements that are now in place. Step number 3, we're going to have a strong upward direction. It's most likely that we'll have a strong upward direction as long as the 5-period RSI closes above the 50 threshold for a minimum of 5 bars. So you want to see the RSI above the 50 line for a minimum of 5 bars. All right, so let's count. Here was our first, as we see here, we had the RSI below and then it went above. So that's bar number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So even though we numbered the currency pair, it's the RSI that is actually above this 50 line for a total of 5 bars. Okay? So right there, that's your clue that most likely, not guaranteed, remember we cannot guarantee anything in any type of trading activity, but we have an edge here now. All right? An edge is giving us a high probability for success. So most likely, now that price is above the 50-period simple moving average, and now that the RSI has closed above its 50 line for 5 bars, most likely we're going to have a strong upward trend. And, as you can see, look what happened. In the next month, the Australian dollar roughly went up about 700 or 800 pips, just off that great edge and that great clue. Here's another example. Here's a weekly chart of the euro dollar. Once again, an older chart. We're using this just for educational purposes so that you fully understand the process. But as you can see here, the RSI tool is below its 50 line, and then right here it closes above, and the currency pair, the weekly chart of the euro dollar, closes above the 50-period moving average right here. So this counts as bar number 1. Bar number 2, 3, 4, 5, because they're all above the 50 threshold. And then look what happens. On a weekly time frame, the euro dollar went up around 1,200 pips in the next 3 or 4 months. How about intraday? On a 4-hour chart, 240-minute chart, we see here that price was above and then oscillated back below, but then ultimately the 5-period RSI crossed above the 50 threshold and price closed above the 50-period simple moving average. So this counts as bar number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because the RSI was above 50 for 5 consecutive bars. So we should have a nice upward trend in the Canadian dollar on an intraday chart. And as we see here, we have a nice upward movement. Okay? Probably about 150 pips or so in the next day.